Ladies and gentlemen, can we take our seats, please, so we can begin? That was quick. You're all a very well-behaved group. Normally it takes me 15 minutes to get people settled. So, Mr. Mayor, Madam Attorney General, Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends, millions of desperate people on the march, driven to flee all that they have ever known by searing violations of human rights, and millions more across the Middle East and North Africa are losing hope that their societies will achieve justice and human rights. The rise of ISIL may not have been entirely predictable, but it was no accident, and neither are the multiple conflagrations across much of the Middle East random or unrelated. Today's horrific crises are the grimmest kind of parable of what may occur when human rights for generations are ground down by the contempt of officialdom, the suppression of the right to express dissent or criticism, the denial of economic justice by way of cronyism and corruption, failure to provide decent public services such as education, harsh, arbitrary and biased law enforcement and legal systems. These were at the heart of the great expression of popular hope that we termed the Arab Spring of 2011. And the brutal crackdowns on those popular movements demanding freedom and democracy are among the major factors that may partially explain the rise of violent extremism. ISIL, or Daesh, and its acolytes will not be defeated by military means alone, nor will it be enough to cut off ISIL's funding or to craft slick so-called narratives of success. People need real hope. They demand and deserve justice and human rights. The opposite view, that mass surveillance, discriminatory policing, crackdowns, torture, abusive prosecutions, widespread use of the death penalty and ever larger prisons will defeat violent extremism, is, if you will, permit me to quote a pop song, like putting out fire with gasoline. It feeds antagonism and resentment and fosters the extremist tentacular spread. To truly combat violent extremism, we must embody its opposite, principled inclusion. We need real clarity about the truth of what has happened, coupled with a determined openness to the benefits and trust that accrue when governments truly serve their people and civil society is given its rightful voice. We must ensure economic justice, political and social power sharing, a deep and broad process that embraces the diversity of our societies and the rights of every individual. And this is where you come in. What are strong cities? They need not be wealthy or abuzz with digital tech. What they must do is inspire the great and resilient bonds of community via the provision of the basic services that underpin a life of dignity and the recognition that each individual is able and entitled to contribute to public life. Here I must point in particular to the rights of women. When women are not free to participate fully, this holds back the economy, impedes the development of fully skilled and confident societies, and in a deep sense it prevents the full expression of respect and dignity for all. Acknowledging women's equal rights to freedom is vital to the strength of every community in every region. It is also crucial to provide opportunities to youth who deserve as much respect as their elders. When large numbers of young people are condemned to a hopeless economic limbo, their frustration will give rise to bitterness. Today, half the world lives in urban areas, and cities are in many ways the greatest hub of human interaction. Life in a great city can help us to perceive our similarities as far more significant to our differences, re-establishing our consciousness of unity and shared destiny. Municipal governments are well placed to understand and serve the needs of their people and to ensure that they feel respected, included, and valued. I have for a long time believed that international institutions should be doing far more to integrate cities into global governance. Currently, for some cities, this cause is a matter of life and death. As some of you know, the tragic, broken city of Halab or Aleppo has a strong claim to the title of oldest city in the world. The specter of its recent ruin and the swift and lethal shattering of its mosaic of many heritages and cultures should haunt us all. To build trust and resilience, officials at all levels of governance need above all to integrate the concerns of the people. Civil society and independent media are partners, not threats. When officials deny their critics the right to participate in decision-making, they do a profound disservice to society. And when the economy is structured to maximize the personal benefit of administrators, the people's justifiable resentment will grow. And when the rule of law can be bent and twisted to fit personal and political agendas, and law enforcement is perceived as violent, arbitrary, and unjust, the destiny of entire nations may crumble. Violence and oppression feed hatred. Their opposite, empathy and respect, are the values that build peace. So as you proceed with your discussions today, I urge you to focus on inclusion, not suspicion. Violent extremism draws on alienation and discrimination. Let us draw on the great and enduring principles of equality and dignity of all. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and it gives me great pleasure as someone who lives in the greatest, or I shouldn't say that because there are many mayors here, in one of the greatest cities in the world. In one of the greatest cities in the world, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the 109th mayor of the city of New York, Mayor de Blasio.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, High Commissioner, I fully have received your message, and I thank you for your characterization of our city. But you managed to do it in a very diplomatic fashion, so I commend you. I want to thank you for the way you framed this discussion, because I think you've gotten to the heart of the matter, to focus on our strengths, and that our true strengths are strengths of inclusion and of serving people and reaching people. And I'm going to speak about that for just a few minutes, but it's something that we in New York City value intensely as our guiding light, what an inclusive society can achieve and how we can overcome so many divisions of the past by an ever more inclusive approach. I want to thank all of you for being a part of this discussion. I want to welcome you as Mayor of New York City. This is a time of year where we're honored to host the United Nations and to host leaders from around the world and to recognize the power that these gatherings bring. And I want to say to my fellow mayors, we are in the vanguard of change around the world, as the High Commissioner indicated. And we should hold ourselves to a high standard. We're able to do things locally that in many ways can set the pace for our national governments and for the international community. So really there should be nowhere better at inclusion and understanding and diversity and openness. No part of our world should be better at that than our cities. So we have a special obligation to achieve those ideals and to show our people that we're relentlessly working on them. I want to thank as well someone key to this process, Sasha Havlicek, the CEO of the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. She's been a key player in bringing the Strong Cities Network to life. Thank you, Sasha, for your great leadership. And we thank you for all you've done to bring today together. Now, this city never could have achieved all it has achieved without tremendous diversity and the acknowledgement and respect for diversity. I often say if New York City has had a secret formula, it has been that it was from its very origins as the city of today, it has been a place that rewarded inclusion and people from all over the world in a way that wasn't true in many other places. Something about being an open city and an inclusive city actually drew the most positive energies of people from all over the world and allowed us to be what we are. So we don't see diversity as a negative or something to manage or overcome. We see diversity as prerequisite to success, and we see it as a vibrant part of a working democracy. This is, I think, therefore a fitting place to talk about the launch of the Strong Cities Network and what it can mean and what it can achieve. This network is different. It is unlike any other effort that we've seen before to counter violent extremism, because it recognizes the tools the High Commissioner spoke of. It recognizes that some of the most powerful impediments to violence are some of the most human and grassroots dynamics within our reach, that creation of an atmosphere and a reality of equality and respect and inclusion. And that formula is powerful in all parts of the world. This network recognizes that the first and most sacred calling of government is to protect our people, to protect their lives and their well-being. But that to do that, we have to redouble our focus on those things that ennoble us the most: our respect for human rights, our respect for civil liberties, and our focus on learning from that which works, not from broad ideas that are not put into practice, but from trying things on the ground at the grassroots and learning together what actually works and what moves hearts and minds and what brings people closer together. These are principles we can act on through the Strong Cities Network. And I think so many of us, through the work we've done in our cities, we understand something fundamental. The most powerful way to counter violent extremism is to go to the core. The core is intolerance. When we address intolerance, when we undermine intolerance in the process, we undermine extremism and violence. And so our job is to do something that we talk about in our foundational documents in the United States, that effort to create a more perfect union, one of the most beautiful and powerful phrases in our first document. But it speaks to something broader I think we all experience and understand, creating that more perfect union, creating that city that everyone feels they belong in, that everyone sees opportunity through, that sense of social cohesion that comes from the facts on the ground, not just our words, but our deeds and the way we govern. The way we govern, showing people that everyone has opportunity and meaning in the society. That is the pathway to cohesion. Creating an atmosphere of respect and communication. We all have seen what happens when parts of our cities, parts of our populations don't feel respected, when they don't see the overt and consistent signs of respect, when there aren't those lines of communication. People know, and we all understand our constituents. We've all lived close to the people of our communities. People know when they're being heard, and they know when they're being excluded. If we create an atmosphere of true respect and communication, it will cross religious lines and cultural lines and racial lines and all other lines, and it will be self-evident. And that, in its very being, will help us to address discrimination and bigotry and those elements of our society that stand in the way of understanding. Our people will know if they're truly included, if they feel they're truly the part of the fabric of our cities and our nation. Now, we know in the work of protecting people, law enforcement plays a crucial role. But I see the incredible opportunity of the Strong Cities Network as going far beyond the work of law enforcement, going to some of the things that all of us know we could do better. The nurturing of our youth, and particularly of youth leadership, positive leadership that can help to move other youth towards positive outcomes in our society. The improving of education, the improving of economic opportunities, and of course social and health services, the things that show people they're cared for, the things that show people that there really is a future for them. We've grappled with these issues here in New York City. We are blessed as a city. We are strong in many, many ways, but we've had our share of problems, and we've had divisions over the decades that we've had to constantly stare in the face and overcome. And even in recent years, we've had to make policy changes to address some of the pain and some of the separation of the past. That's why, in terms of our approach to policing, we ended a policy that was broken related to the practice of stop and frisk, which was creating a rift between our police and our communities. We closed down a unit of our police force that was known as the demographics unit, that was widely perceived to be focused particularly on our Muslim American communities. That was creating a wedge that didn't need to be there. Two examples. One more associated with African American and Latino communities, the other associated more with our Muslim American communities. Two examples of where government policies sadly and inadvertently created some distance between the people and their government, when in fact our mission is to constantly imbue in our people the sense that the government is at one with them. We've made those changes, and we've seen already, just over the last 2 years, the positive effect of removing some of the negatives and opening up the possibility of greater closeness between communities and government. But we've done positive things too, new things that said by their very existence that we believed in inclusion and respect. We started something we're very proud of, the ID NYC program. It's a municipal identification card for all people who live in New York City, and crucially important, it does not discriminate based on whether an individual who lives here happens to have documentation by our national government. We recognize there's almost 500,000 people in New York City who are quote-unquote undocumented. But in the eyes of New York City, they're our fellow New Yorkers. They're just as important, just as worthy of respect as anyone else. They have a right to an identification card that opens up many doors for them. And so far in the city of 8.5 million people, just this year alone, over 500,000 people have signed up for such an identification card because it means something to them to feel included. It's not just a practical measure, it has that virtue as well, but it's powerfully an example of belonging. We also took a step, a simple but I have to say extraordinarily powerful step, because some of our communities, again, this shows the breadth of the thinking we can bring to the Strong Cities Network. Some of our communities felt excluded because their children were not able to practice their religion fully and see their religious holidays recognized by our school system. And so, because we have very large Asian American communities represented in our school system and very large Muslim American communities represented in our school system, as a matter of law, we changed our school calendar and recognized the two Eid holidays in the Muslim calendar and the Asian Lunar New Year holiday. Official act in which all of our school children take a day off from school the same way they would for Christian or Jewish holidays. It sent a powerful message of inclusion. It had a very practical impact for people's lives as well. We know that our efforts to combat extremism must be seen as universal. Extremism, I say this ironically, but it's a true statement, extremism doesn't discriminate. It comes in many forms. It comes from many different backgrounds and ideologies. Our mission should be to address extremism in all its forms, but that possibility of reaching people at the grassroots, it is an antidote across all those communities and those forums. That sense of respect and inclusion works regardless of what type of extremism we're addressing. You know, today's a day many people are focused on particular issues in this country, so it's pertinent to say in 1994, people were lost, lives were lost in the bombing of a Planned Parenthood facility in Massachusetts. That was one form of extremism. We saw a very powerful and tragic incident in Peshawar recently where children were slaughtered from another form of extremism. We all felt deeply around the world the tragedy in Paris after the attack on the Charlie Hebdo office, and in a different way in this country, not so long ago, and something we still feel the pain of, the shootings in Charleston, South Carolina, in a house of worship. Each of these forms of extremism were different, but they have so much in common that we need to address, and we will. And we know that for those who suffer as a result of extremism, they don't parse and focus on the definition of what type of extremism took away their loved one or their family member or split their community apart. To them, there's a sad equality that any violent extremism had the same result in their lives. The Strong Cities Network will be a message to all families who have lost loved ones because of extremism that something is being done in a new and powerful way. We will be vigilant against all forms of violent extremism, whether it's based in religious or racial or nationalistic or ideological intolerance. That will give a power to this effort. We will focus always where the need is greatest, but that sense of universality will strengthen this effort in so many ways. Each of our cities faces different realities, and being in this network certainly allows for us to have the flexibility to address our local realities and needs. But at the same time, we're going to learn from each other, be strengthened by each other. In the end, we know a lot about what it takes to build trust with our communities at the local level. We know how important it is to be honest about what's standing in the way of that trust. That very discussion of saying, why do some of our people not feel included? Why do they not feel connected? What are we missing? That is part of reaching a solution. We're all interested in protecting our people, while embracing all of our people, all of our communities, all of our neighborhoods. Bringing government closer to the grassroots is one of the best ways we can protect our people. With that, I very much look forward to working with all of you in common cause, and I think this is the kind of effort that will lead to a safer and more just world. And now it's my profound pleasure and honor to introduce the next speaker. I have to say, as an American, I could not be more proud of our Attorney General. What she's done throughout her life has been dedicated to the protection of people of all kinds, of all backgrounds equally. And if you look at her work, she has devoted herself to the fight against inequality in so many ways and upheld the most noble traditions of the Justice Department. And for all of you who know the history of this nation over the last half century in particular, the Justice Department often was the vanguard of recognizing the discrimination we had to overcome and the intolerance we had to overcome in our nation. Well, now we have an Attorney General who epitomizes that fight and has been so effective within it. It's my honor to introduce the Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch.
Great words. Thank you. Thank you and good afternoon, all. I have to thank you, Bill, for those kind words, but also for your dedication and commitment to equality. I know that it is lifelong, and I know that it is bone deep. And I am just glad that the other cities of the world will have a chance to see what all of us New Yorkers know, that you will lead this cause in a way that will advance it and give people hope and safety and a future. I also want to recognize the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Prince Zed. So glad to see an old friend. And I also want to thank you for your words of inclusion, particularly on the issue of gender equality, the issue of women's place in the world, and the issue of women's role in the economies and our futures is one that I think is key to not just this debate, but to every debate of our time. So I want to thank you for that as well as for the work that the UN Habitat Program does and the leadership that you've shown there. We're all coming together today. We're all working to build a future of sustainable peace, of development opportunity, and it is really a pleasure to be with so many friends and colleagues. I want to also thank all of the mayors and other municipal leaders who are here today, those who could not be here, but everyone who is joining this cause, helping to ensure safe and prosperous futures for our communities and our world. The steering committee of the Strong Cities Network deserves so much thanks for the behind the scenes and groundwork in getting this enterprise ready for all of us to join in and carry it forward. And it is truly a pleasure to join such a distinguished group of world leaders on this historic occasion. And it is indeed my honor and privilege to represent the Obama administration and the United States as we inaugurate this innovative, this collaborative, and this critically important global effort. My friends, we are all here today at an extremely crucial moment, a moment of challenge, a moment of opportunity, a moment that will really tell us how we will define the security of our nations, and really is about nothing less than the well-being of humankind. 14 years ago, not far from where we all sit today, terrorists carried out a vicious assault on democratic values and inclusive societies everywhere. Their brutal attack claimed the lives of thousands of innocent victims who were citizens of 90 nations, citizens of our world. And in the years since that morning when terror rained down from the sky, we have continued to see violent extremists emerge from within our own communities, from terrorists inspired by groups like ISIL to fanatics motivated by hatred against religious or ethnic factions of any type. Some aspire to travel overseas, to train or to fight, and others plot attacks on targets within their homelands, all of our homelands. But all of this views of violent extremism, and indeed extremism, is antithetical to the shared vision and the common cause that joins us here today in this renowned international forum. And that cause, of course, is our commitment to collaboration, our dedication to peace, and our devotion to the cause of justice within our nations and throughout the world. Now, it's clear that the challenge of building this resilience that we need against violent extremism, a challenge that, as we see from our representatives here today, spans oceans and borders, but also impacts our most tightly knit cities and towns. This challenge requires a response that is both wide-ranging and highly focused. National governments, of course, have a crucial role to play by ensuring the safety and the security of the nations they serve. And of course, here in the United States, it is our highest priority. Neither the Justice Department that I lead nor the administration in which I serve will ever back down from our commitment and our responsibility to safeguard our citizens and defend our homeland. But as a lifelong prosecutor and as a former United States attorney here in New York, here in my home, I've also seen firsthand how local authorities can serve as the front lines in our defense against violent extremism, indeed, extremism of any kind. As residents and experts, true experts in their communities, local leaders are often best positioned to pinpoint the sources of unrest and discord. You are best equipped to identify the signs of potential danger and best able to recognize and accommodate community cultures, the traditions and the sensitivities and customs that make all of our cities strong and great. Now, by creating a series of partnerships that draws on this vital knowledge and expertise of our local officials, we can create a more effective response to this violent threat. Now, the government of the United States is fully invested in this collaborative approach. And we have seen the value of empowering local communities by promoting initiatives that they design and that they lead themselves. Through our Model Regions program, federal officials have partnered with a wide array of local stakeholders, including government and public safety officers, social service providers, educators, businesses, and nonprofits, to build and implement community resilience frameworks that are tailored to the unique needs of residents. In Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, for example, government officials, private partners, and civic leaders have come together to create a mentorship program for Somali youth, to build an opportunity hub that provides educational resources and job training, and to contribute to a program called Youth Prize that is forging connections between community organizations, investors, and young people. And I look forward to hearing more about this and so many other innovative programs. Now, at the same time, officials in the greater Boston region are exploring the connection between criminal justice and public health. Many of us have seen this for years, but in Boston, they are partnering with the Massachusetts Office of Health and Human Services to tap into their experiences with violence prevention and intervention. because, of course, violence is a public health issue. And in the Denver area, the U.S. Attorney's Office has led a multifaceted community engagement and education effort involving all levels of government. These initiatives and others like them were the subject of a convening just 2 weeks ago, organized by the department's Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services in conjunction with the Police Executive Research Forum, which brought together law enforcement executives and community partners from over a dozen cities to plan ways to translate these cutting-edge programs into new regions, into all of your regions. Now, these efforts have literally illustrated for us the power of harnessing local expertise and leveraging local leadership to create targeted and effective approaches to eradicating violent extremism in any community. We've learned that open dialogue and consistent engagement with a wide range of constituents, as the mayor said, with everyone who represents the beautiful face of all of our cities, it's essential to crafting strategies and forging partnerships that will address the full scope of the threats that we face. Now, we've seen that communities, people on the ground, must be empowered to take them steps themselves so that the prevention approaches that they design are crafted for their unique situations, for the problems that are presented to them. And we've also observed the need for a mechanism that will expand the most effective efforts to reach more people around the globe, a way to highlight the best of the local ideas so they can be adapted for use in other communities, for use in all of our communities. Now, until now, we've lacked that mechanism. Until now, we haven't had the full benefit of sustained and coordinated cooperation among the growing number of cities and municipalities that are confronting this ongoing challenge, although many people have indeed reached out across rivers and oceans to build those networks. But until now, too many communities have often felt isolated and alone in the problems that they face, in the losses that are engendered by children lost to violent extremism. But today, we have a different approach. Through the Strong Cities Network being unveiled today, we're making the first systematic effort in history to bring together cities around the world to share experiences, to pool all of our resources, and to forge partnerships in order to build local cohesion and resilience on a global scale. Today is the day that we tell every city, every town, and every community that has ever lost the flower of its youth to a sea of hatred, that you are not alone. We stand together, and we stand with you. This is a truly groundbreaking endeavor. By connecting municipal leaders, by facilitating information sharing, and providing training and other assistance where appropriate, the Strong Cities Network will help to fashion a global response to a global issue without losing sight of its inherently local roots. It will offer city leaders a way to learn from one another about successful initiatives and productive programs. It will also provide a platform for discussing community policing and prevention strategies that safeguard the individual rights of citizens, the individual rights of all our citizens. And it will help support the practical delivery of community resilience programs in cities that are taking a new look at this evolving issue. And I want you to know from the top of the Obama administration, that this administration is deeply committed to ensuring that the Strong Cities Network is as strong and as vibrant and as resilient as the cities that it unites, because we know that this model works. It just works. Here in the United States, we've joined with local partners to bring down far-flung human trafficking rings, to strengthen trust in law enforcement, to thwart cybersecurity threats, and to combat official and international corruption. Our experience tells us that partnering with city-level officials and the communities that they represent, the communities that we all represent, extends the reach and deepens the perspective of national governments as well as international alliances, and makes all of us stronger. By connecting these localities to one another, as this network, the Strong Cities Network, is doing, we will not only have a powerful way to lift up our communities worldwide, we will send a message from all of our voices about who we are and about what we aspire to be as an alliance of nations and a global community. And when the representatives of the Strong Cities Network join together for their first annual summit in Paris in the spring of 2016, they will be making a strong and a clear statement, a decisive statement to their citizens, to all our citizens, and to the world, that we stand together. We stand united against violence. We stand united against fear. And we stand united in the pursuit of a better and brighter future for our citizens, for all our citizens. Now, my friends, this work will not be easy. There are many challenges ahead, and there will be difficult days for us all, but it's never been easy. We've always had difficult days in the fight to lead strong and diverse cities. But the spirit of collaboration that I see before me today and that has come together and is represented by this network, this devotion to partnership and mutual support, gives me such confidence. It gives me hope, frankly, for the journey ahead. And I want to thank all of you for coming here together today, for your work leading up to this day, but most of all, for your outstanding service. Thank you all for your visionary leadership on a project that is truly without precedent. Thank you for your commitment to the mission of our time. And now, it's my honor to turn things over to Sasha Havlicek, the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. Sasha and I were speaking earlier, and she encaptured this issue so strongly and so beautifully when she said, this is about our youth. It's about saving not just their hope, not just their future, but their lives. Sasha, I'm honored to turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you so very much, Attorney General. Let me first say what an enormous privilege and honor it is for me to be here, sitting alongside you all here today to launch the Strong Cities Network. This morning's Leaders Summit looked at the challenge of countering violent extremism from a 25,000-foot perspective. This afternoon, we're bringing that conversation literally down to the ground, to street level, to the level of communities that are directly impacted by this challenge and in all urgency require action on this challenge. For nearly 10 years now, my institute has been pioneering programs to prevent the spread of violent extremism in all its forms, building transformative grassroots networks, networks of youth, networks of women, networks of former extremists and survivors of extremism, partnering with the tech and private sectors to try to amplify those voices on and offline and engage directly with young people at risk of the grooming and radicalizing that is happening on and offline. And we've worked with partners to build the capacities of local governments and frontline workers, mainly in Europe to date, be they teachers or social workers, be they municipal officials. And we've tried to develop tools, tangible tools, and give them access to information about what works so that they can respond more effectively to the challenge. And what have we learned so far? In the first place, that such efforts are far too few and far between still. Efforts need to be significantly streamlined, scaled up, internationalized, and evaluated. What we've learned is that effective and sustainable prevention to countering violent extremism must be rooted at the grassroots level. Cities are therefore genuinely the front line in this global challenge, and yet many still feel isolated and overwhelmed by the complex challenges posed by the violent extremisms that their communities face. They need more support, and it is on that premise that the Strong Cities Network is being constructed as a dedicated platform to pool our collective knowledge and expertise, build capacity, and help local authorities better to support their communities in efforts to combat discrimination and prevent young people from being targeted by violent extremists. The SCN is designed to connect, inform, empower, build partnerships, innovate, and represent local authorities' needs. And in practical terms, this will include regional and international CV exchanges, workshops, and innovation labs, an online information hub with a searchable library of existing local programs, tools, and approaches, and over time, evaluation data to help us optimize that work. Training and capacity building delivered through targeted seminars as well as online modules. In-depth international partnerships and twinning programs. And local innovation grants to spur new approaches and support innovative partnerships at local level. And finally, the representation of the needs of local authorities, a bottom-up way of informing national and international decision-making in this space. We are extremely excited to spearhead the SCN, working alongside a formidable steering committee of 25 cities that are convened here today to launch the network, many of whom have pioneered new and innovative approaches to prevent violent extremism themselves. This exceptional group of 25 local authorities from around the world have and will continue to shape the Strong Cities network so that it is fit for purpose. Tomorrow, the governing mayor of Oslo, who I would like to salute as one of the core founding members of this initiative, will host the inaugural meeting of the SCN Steering Committee. And before I have the honor of introducing a number of those steering committee members, permit me just to say a final few words about the core values and operating principles of this network that I hope echo some of the wisdom of the presentations we've just heard. The Strong Cities Network is a network focused on supporting cities to prevent all forms of violent extremism. It is important to remember that while attention is currently focused on ISIS and the challenge of foreign fighters, the threat of other forms of violent extremism, not least extreme right-wing groups, remain critical and of critical concern to local authorities around the world and the communities that they represent. At the same time, the SCN will work to prevent violent extremism while safeguarding the fundamental rights of all citizens and residents. Indeed, the SCN will and must work in partnership with local communities on an absolutely inclusive, collaborative, and non-discriminatory basis. Thank you again for all your support in launching this important new global initiative, especially to the panel that we have here. A real heartfelt thanks to getting this off the ground in the way that it needed to get off the ground. And as I ask our next panel to join me up here, I have the pleasure of introducing the Honorable Denis Coderre, Mayor of Montreal. Mayor Coderre has been at the forefront of global information sharing between cities and has played a founding role in shaping the Strong Cities Network. He will be joining us tomorrow, but for now, I'm delighted to welcome him through his pre-recorded video statement. So thank you again to all. Thank you.
We are all gathered together to attend an important and essential event, the launch of the Strong Cities Network. I am sorry that I'm not able to be with you today at the United Nations, but I will have the pleasure of being with you tomorrow to lend my full support to this network. Cities, and more particularly metropolises, are called upon to play an increasingly important role in the way citizens live together. Globalization, the evolution of communications, and the mobility of populations compel us to cope with new realities that have a direct impact on the way we manage our cities. In this context, we have a duty to act right now on our relationship with all our citizens by constantly seeking to strike the right balance between openness and vigilance. We, mayors, are on the front lines. We are the local administrators who are best placed to understand all the issues and take action. Despite our differing origin and challenges, it is imperative that we work together to share our best practices. The battle against violent extremism, which demands our attention and resources, must not eclipse the work that we all must do before things even get to that point. Our duty is to maintain social cohesion, a cohesion that can be greatly impacted by local programs and policies. It is with great conviction that Montreal has agreed to join the Strong Cities Network founders. This global network is designed to build on community-based approaches to address violent extremism and promote openness and vigilance. I am delighted that through the Strong Cities Network, the City of Montreal will more actively share information and best practices with a global network of leaders on critical issues facing our communities. J'ai d'ailleurs fait appel à vous, chers collègues, en juin dernier, pour réfléchir à ces questions dans le cadre d'un sommet international des maires sur le vivre ensemble. La mise sur pied de l'Observatoire international des maires sur le vivre ensemble est l'un des résultats directs du sommet et nous permettra de nourrir un réseau encore plus large. Vous êtes la preuve éloquente que les villes ne sont plus cantonnées dans leurs frontières à s'occuper uniquement d'enjeux locaux et à dépendre de leur gouvernement national. Through the voices of their local leaders, cities are asserting themselves. They take the lead on issues that affect them. Cities are talking, they're engaging, we are cooperating. Cities are helping to change the world. In closing, I wish to thank the U.S. State Department, the United Nations, and the Institute for Strategic Dialogue for this initiative, and for organizing and hosting today's launch. You can count on Montreal. I look forward to being with you all tomorrow morning and to getting down to work. Merci beaucoup.
It is now my distinct honor to welcome our distinguished panel. I'd like to welcome up here Dr. Aissa Kachira, Deputy Executive Director and Assistant Secretary General at UN Habitat and former Governor of Eastern Province in Rwanda, also formerly Mayor of Kigali City. Also, the Honorable Ahmed Abu Taleb, Mayor of Rotterdam. His Excellency Governor Joho of Mombasa, Kenya. And last but certainly not least, the Honorable Betsy Hodges, Mayor of Minneapolis here in the United States. We have asked our panelists to reflect a little bit on the challenges that they are facing in their cities, and to reflect a little about the role that the SCN may be able to play in your cities. Now, before we go to our steering committee, mayors and governors, I'd like to ask Dr. Aissa Kachira to talk to us a little bit about a very important initiative, the Safer Cities Initiative, and its relation to the SCN.
Thank you very much, Sasha. Distinguished panelists, dear participants, good afternoon to you all. Let me first of all thank the organizers of the Strong Cities Network and initiators of the idea for bringing up this idea, because I believe that it's very appropriate and timely and necessary at this point in time. We are very honored and delighted as UN Habitat, and I, as former mayor of a capital city in a post-conflict, post-genocide state, I do know what it means, and I really sincerely appreciate that. Allow me, Sasha, maybe before I come to the Safer Cities program, I just want to mention a few quick things. That UN Habitat, by virtue of our mandate, we are mandated to support member states and cities to foster sustainable urbanization and human settlements. And so we are closely interlinked with the cities. And while our work ideally should be much more normative and operational from a development perspective, we find ourselves spending over 65% of our program of work in conflict and post-conflict areas because of what is taking place in the world. And so from that perspective, we have been in areas like Afghanistan, Somalia, DRC, Rwanda, Sri Lanka for over 15 to 20 years. And we have seen that in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of extremism, the human soul, the human being is still looking for meaning. And it's really so much up to leadership to be able to identify what can be done to nurture this through inclusion, through social cohesion, and through giving back human dignity to the people. And so we're here to really advocate that this, as the Attorney General just said, is practical, it's achievable, and the role of leadership, especially local governments, is certainly very critical. I would like to also highlight in the same way that, especially for fragile states and for young developing countries where institutions are still young, we shouldn't underestimate the role of government, national government. But what is important in the sense of Strong Cities Network is that we are dealing with a global issue. People are migrating in big numbers. Even if you're the best of mayors, you cannot ensure the safety and security of your people by simply being introverted. We have to be connected, and we have to be connected with a purpose, because urbanization is a driver of socioeconomic transformation. We do believe that. But unfortunately, today, the way it's going, with increasing prosperity, is increasing inequality. Mayor Bill de Blasio talked about the diversity, which should be beautiful. But with diversity, if we are not tolerant, if we don't know how to deal with differences as human beings, then conflict is prone. That is why we have got to strengthen governance, and we have to enable the leader to be actually a leader of everybody in the city. So for us, what we see in UN Habitat, we talk about local governance where the mayor is enabled and empowers himself or herself to empower others below her or him and still remain connected to their people. So from that perspective and the research that we have done, in the last over 40 years, we came up with this program that you just mentioned, Safer Cities Initiative, that now is becoming a network where we have got 80 cities in 24 countries where we have been working for over 14 years to look at the issue of safety and security. How do we ensure that as we plan for the city, as we enable to avail basic services, everybody is included and everybody feels safe? Some fundamental basic rights that sometimes we take for granted, for instance, public space. Not everybody has access to safe public space. Not everybody has access to safe transport. Not everybody has access to a voice. So when we talk about democracy, for us, first of all, what does the city leader or what does the city fabric provide in terms of enabling this governance framework whereby everybody can find themselves? And on that note, I would like to say, from my personal example, back at home in Rwanda, it isn't about the level of poverty, as it is about the sense of identity and a sense of belonging. When people feel that they are part and parcel of the issues, even amidst meager resources, they feel a sense of pride. And they will work together to resolve conflict. I'm talking about a city that was actually was created much more out of the crisis, which means that actually even people who are already carrying conflict and extremism within them can be transformed if leadership is willing to invest the political capital in building trust and equal access to opportunity. Finally, I would like to emphasize and thank also the previous speakers. I'm sure we'll maybe come back to that later, the essence of partnership. This is not something that we can do on our own. We have seen that in UN Habitat, we're working with our sister agencies. I've just mentioned a few things that we're doing. We're working specifically to target the vulnerable or the groups that are much more at risk, especially youth, women, and in areas of land. But we know that we cannot do that by ourselves. We have to work with all the key stakeholders, and that is why we welcome this initiative of the Strong Cities Network that we look forward to work together with in the strongest possible way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kochira. Now, if I have the distinct honor of passing the floor to Mayor Abu Taleb of Rotterdam, the first Moroccan-Dutch mayor of a large Dutch city, a great leader in community engagement work, a pioneer in many ways. And we look very much forward to hearing a little bit about the approaches that you've put in place already, what you feel works, and what you believe the SCN can do beyond that to help.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, who knows where Rotterdam is? Great. That's a great honor for me, as we are the second largest city in the Netherlands with the largest port in Europe, feeding 500 million inhabitants. Great to know that you know where we are. I really welcome, Sasha, this initiative. I participated in a number of meetings and systems in Europe and in the world talking about a huge number of issues, but this is really new. And I think that what the former mayor of Toronto said, that our leaders, as they did this morning, are talking, that mayors and city governments must act. And I think that's the difference. Bringing what you said, the discussion from 25,000 meters to ground level. That's why I'm happy to participate in this meeting and to be a member of this initiative. In Rotterdam, we invest in what I call the we community. And when I speak about the we community, I always symbolize it by doing this symbol. It's all connected within the we community. Why? Because when you speak about myself as an individual, that's weak, that's nothing. We is strong, it's a collective. That is, by principle, an inclusive approach. We gave citizens from 174 nationalities. So I am a small United Nations, 174 nationalities, a sense of belonging, a sense of partnership. In the we community, there is enough space for diversity, as Mayor de Blasio this afternoon said. There is enough space for also religious diversity, even for orthodoxy, even. Some people don't want to accept that, but there is space for everyone. There is space for action groups. There is even space for people with radical ideas. I welcome a lot of radical ideas. Radical ideas in climate issues, radical ideas in how to deal with energy, radical ideas how to deal with food, water, education, radical ideas like Mr. de Blasio brought into this system to change the system of the policing, radical ideas. I welcome them. We're not afraid of radical ideas. There is one border, and that is when radicalism turns into violence. That's the border. That's the limit. So after the Paris shooting, I organized a huge demonstration in the city of Rotterdam to express our anger to what happens over there. And I had a speech saying, "Je suis Charlie." Why did I say "Je suis Charlie"? That was not because I was accepting the content of the paper Charlie Hebdo. I never spoke about that. But I feel a profound need to say that I have to defend a very important aspect, and that is the freedom of expression. A freedom of expression that is, to me, a key principle, being also a member of a minority. I had a march through the Dutch institutions from nothing to being mayor of the second largest city in the Netherlands, thanks to the freedoms. I migrated to the Netherlands because of the freedoms. And as we speak, thousands of refugees are in small boats in the Mediterranean going to Europe, seeking for freedom. And that's the reason why they came to Europe. So we have to defend the freedom regardless what the content of what you say is. And there is not something as the right not to be offended. And I think that's really important to accept that the freedom of speech, primarily in our constitutions, is there to defend the right of minorities. And of course, we have to work from the angle of inclusion. And everybody speaks about inclusion, and I know how it is to be included. In education, scarce product of society, labor market, a paid job, a decent housing, important elements of inclusive thinking. But accept, ladies and gentlemen, that I say something different. Is that enough to prevent people from traveling to Daesh? I doubt whether inclusive thinking from what governments can do will be enough not to leave to Daesh. I had the complicated task to speak to a young lady of the age of 16 in my city who was planning to go to Daesh. And we discovered the attempt, and I have the responsibility to issue passports, so I had also the opportunity to withdraw the passport and ask her to come to my office to have a chat. It took an hour. Asking her, why do you want to leave this wonderful place with these freedoms to go to Daesh where there's unfreedom? Can you tell me that? A complicated discussion followed. And in fact, that has nothing to do with a lack of social inclusion. Everything that was connected to what I call Sheikh Google. There was someone there in Iraq telling her how exciting it is to come to join Daesh in that region. It has nothing to do with poverty, nothing to do with local opportunities. It has to do with an ideology. And that is complicated to tackle for persons. Why? Because an ideology is in the brains and we cannot see it actively. So it's difficult for us mayors and leaders of governments to tackle that. And we must say that. That's why I was this morning happy to hear at least one leader talking about the responsibility, claiming ownership of this subject, the King of Jordan. He said, it's now up to the Muslim community to act. They are, for a great deal, a part, they have a responsibility to take, and they must act. And I would like to underline that. That's why I really believe that we have to do something with religious education, the role of parents, the role of religious leaders. The Mufti of the Azhar University came to me in Rotterdam 3 months ago, and we had a chat. It took about an hour. And he underlines also that his institution and the Islamic countries have a role to play in another way of religious education. And I hear a lot about tolerance. I do not speak about tolerance, because tolerance is also about neglecting the other. I'm talking about acceptance. So we have to teach our kids to accept the difference, to accept that the other one has also the right to have his own religious truth. And giving these principles to our kids is, I think, the most important thing we can do. Teach them to accept the other and not to tolerate the other, because tolerance is neglecting the other. In my city, this is the basic for my policy. We mobilize all resources, the money, the capital, the human capital to do the work. And I visit the neighborhoods once in 2 weeks to talk to my citizens about this fundamental phenomenon, how to build a weak community by investing and by asking citizens to participate and to have a role in this whole process. Working together, exchanging knowledge is very important, but also asking parents to be involved in this theme, because they have a major role to play. And in the Arab language, we say, the heaven is under the feet of your mother. So if the mother is participating enough, there must be a chance also to work together to increase prevention. Thank you so much. It took too much time, so excuse me.
Thank you so much, Mayor Abu Taleb. Your Excellency, Governor Joho of Mombasa, not only are you a leader of this great place in Kenya, you are a renowned business leader and philanthropist at the same time, and have been central to driving social projects in Mombasa County for a long time. So I look forward to hearing a little bit about the needs that you see in terms of countering violent extremism, and to touch on the role that the SCN might be able to play in supporting those needs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is an honor and privilege to address this gathering. I'm proud to say that I'm here to represent Mombasa, a beautiful island that is in the eastern African coast, that has over the years been an epitome of diversity and coexistence, a cosmopolitan melting pot that has one of the most amazing cultural and ethnic mix in the entire continent, in the entire world. One of Mombasa's city's founder, a lady known as Mwanamkisi, was a woman noted for her wisdom, generosity, compassion, characters that are still deeply entrenched in the psyche of the city's 1.4 million inhabitants. Though Mombasa is predominantly Muslim, it has never been afraid to embrace the other. Today, the city representation is pluralism and diversity. The Muslim call to prayer, which is the adhan, is normally heard with the backdrop of church bells. And Hindu temples and Sikh gurdwaras are part of our city's landmark. While we are proud about our past, we are concerned about our present. The erosion of civil society, breakup in social cohesion, and intolerance are challenges that threaten our ages-old ability to be resilient. I believe that the key to building safer cities is in harnessing the city's strength. In the case of Mombasa, it is in its rediscovering its Islamic identity and building on the cosmopolitan base values, trade, and culture. We must find spaces where communities are engaged with one another, where trust is developed. Trust is the cornerstone of resilience. The mobilization of religious leadership is critical to both street and grassroots level of addressing trust deficit. It is not only about giving fatwas, but also to facilitate engagement within civil society, to address local needs and problems, from unemployment to drugs, education to marriage, identifying individuals of influence and empowering them. Capacity building them is a vital first step. Religious language is powerful in both clarifying a shared agenda and into setting in motion a modus operandi among a diverse group of people. Engaging with the young people needs to be the cornerstone of any strategy. Joint community work is vital. Once again, identifying leadership at the grassroots and encouraging joint social action is a way to build trust. Allowing youth to develop and implement projects that address local needs builds the kind of opportunities for cross-community cooperation, and that is needed also, but also it builds a lot of trust. Supporting positive media for storytelling is central. How do cities like myself, the city that I lead, Mombasa, how do we tell the best of our stories to ourselves? How can media, radio, TV, social media, be a place to mediate conflicts and debate, also offer resolution? I therefore think an investment is needed in building capacity and outlets themselves so that communities are fairly and are in charge of their own narrative. Engaging and empowering women's leadership needs to be a pillar of any strategy. As with youth, identifying influential local leadership is vital, as is building on existing work and networks, but also making strategic partnership that can grow new initiatives, such as this one. All practical works must be based on a whole community strategy. Community resilience is not limited to CVE agenda, but is broader. The broader coalition of partners and interests engaged, the stronger initiatives will be. They also need to be a broader, more inclusive and visionary community aspiration than merely CVE. CVE is not enough to convince ordinary people to act. CVE agendas are often regarded as foreign and out of touch with local realities. In most instances, thanks to the security apparatus necessities, it is seen as oppressive and intrusive and confrontational. The role of global civil society and innovation-led networks such as this creates strength and does regional work. Cities like Mombasa are hardwired with globalization. It is in their blood and their identity. Harnessing the global connection is natural and necessary. So friends, I would like to end with a word of caution that there's a tendency within CVE networks to focus on threat itself and not the context in which the threat emerges. It is a grave error and mistake. Context is vital and local knowledge is vital. It is important that solutions, while discussed within the global framework, emerge based on local realities and sustainable partnerships. The emergence of Shabab, for example, has not been caused by the people of Mombasa, but by the broader international context. And finally, it is wrong to perpetrate the notion that religion, especially Islam, is a problem. For most Muslims who are frontline victims of extremist violence, their only recourse to the madness that confronts them is in the teachings and the understanding of their religion, and not in abandoning it. And I say this because I have had quite a share of experience and engagement with some of, and it's unfortunate that it may be seen that it's a situation from a city to city, but the fact remains there are some people that travel from as far as Mombasa to Syria. So we have interacted, like my colleague the mayor has said here, with people who have been the returnees, and how do we rehabilitate them. But I want to say that for as long as we have a mediation arrangement where we get people on board, we see success. And therefore, this initiative, it has come at an opportune moment to get us talking as a people, to get us to share experiences. We are the gateway to East Africa as Mombasa. We have a porous border. Our border with the Somali is the Indian Ocean. But we also seen a shift from how people move to go to Somalia, and some of them now are moving to go to Syria. We even have the Syrian brides, by the way, from Mombasa that have traveled as far, and only on notion that the narrative is the pro-jihad narrative is really what they need to go to heaven. But the fact remains that me as a Muslim, I know very well, the moment I dare take that route, that is hell for me. And if anything, we need to focus on the teachings. We need to create a counter-narrative. As the military, as the security organs are doing their job, we also must create a counter-narrative that is community-based. And I can assure you that I have seen some sense of success in the city that I lead. I want to stop at this point, and I want to thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Governor Joho. And now it's my distinct pleasure to pass the floor to Honorable Betsy Hodges, Mayor of Minneapolis. As mayor of this U.S. pilot CVE city, you have a reputation for launching and delivering innovative programs, not least the improvement of police-community relations. And so we're particularly interested to hear from you about your experiences in this space, and again, to hear what the SCN might be able to offer.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and it's an honor to be on this panel with such distinguished colleagues and to be here in this setting. Thank you so much. I am blessed to be mayor of Minneapolis. I will not ask folks to raise their hand if you know where it is. I will say we are on the north and middle part of the United States. We border Canada, Minnesota does, and Minneapolis has a twin city, St. Paul, sort of in the central east part of the state. We are blessed to have the Mississippi River running through our city. We are a city built inside a park. You are all invited warmly to come visit Minneapolis and have the best urban experience of your entire life. We are in a spotlight doing this work. Between 2007 and 2009, dozens of folks from my city and my region were recruited to Al-Shabaab. 20 were charged. ISIL has taken some of those recruitment techniques, they've honed them and are active. Since last November, 10 folks in Minnesota have been charged with either with trying to leave or coordinating with people who are trying to leave to fight with ISIL. Just today, a study came out naming Minnesota the place where most active and successfully active recruitment has been happening. Out of a set of 19 states, a quarter of the recruits from all of those 19 states were coming from Minnesota. We have a challenge that we are facing. Overall, one of the blessings in the city of Minneapolis is that we are a cosmopolitan city. We have people from all around the world. It is a blessing, and as Mayor de Blasio so aptly said, this diversity is a requirement for success. It's not a problem. It's a requirement for our success. We are blessed to have the largest Somali population outside of Mogadishu in any city. That is a blessing. The community is strong and invests. There are some challenges, however, that most of the recruitment has been happening, not all of it, but a large portion of it has been happening within the Somali community in the city of Minneapolis. And I'm not here today to speak to the pull. I'm not here today to speak to why it is attractive when someone is being recruited, why the pull is strong enough to be successful. But I can speak a little bit about the push that we give in our community and about what prevents us as a community so far from pulling back hard enough to be a counterweight against the pull from the other side. My role as mayor, I see as very practical. First, my role as mayor is to honor, respect, and protect the people that I represent. and to set up my city structures so that everybody in my city is respected and everybody has an opportunity to participate in and contribute to our growth and our prosperity. And there are programs and there are policies and there are things that I can put into place, that we as leaders can put into place, that will give some resource or give some assistance to folks who might need a little more assistance to make sure that they can contribute to our growth and prosperity. There are some practical investments, for example, that I've put in the budget to help the work within the Somali community in Minneapolis. Proportionally, Somali folks in Minneapolis have the highest levels of poverty, and some distinct things that we can do within the community and within our poverty strategies that will make a difference. One of those, for example, is putting more money into affordable housing for people with larger families or for families that are larger. The ideas for these strategies came from me being in the community, talking with the community, having staff who, my staff who are of the community and in the community, and my own conversations. And one of the top things I heard was, we need housing for families that are larger. And so that's some of the investments that I am working to make in the city of Minneapolis. Mentoring programs that we have, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment, as part of our pilot project and as part of the coordinating work we're doing as a region. Investments doing outreach in the community for parents whose children have autism. Somali community has higher rates of autism than other communities in Minneapolis and in Minnesota. We don't yet know why, but we do know that it's an issue and one that I have directed there be training in all our departments for folks who who go into people's homes or work with people in the community. And then the Opportunity Hub. Having a center right in the heart of where the concentration of Somali population is in Minneapolis, to have a one-stop shop for education assistance, workforce assistance, social services, after-school opportunities, to have an opportunity hub right there in the community is something the community has asked for, and something that I've been partnering with our county, with our U.S. Attorney, with Councilmember Abdu Warsame of Minneapolis, who represents a number of folks in the community. Those sorts of practical investments are things that I can do as mayor, because that poverty and that lack of opportunity is one of the push factors that people identify very strongly. And we have a Building Community Resilience project. This is our pilot project to build community resilience. It's a Twin Cities pilot program. It's a partnership with our U.S. Attorney's Office. We worked with leadership and members of the Somali community in 2014 to identify from the community what those root causes are and put together an action plan based on community needs. We designed a plan with the community and with the community in mind. From that sprung a Somali American task force to lead the effort, community-based again, with significant participation from youth, from our imams, and from women in the community, as well as men. And from that have sprung public-private partnerships with business, with philanthropy, with nonprofit sector, and with government. And what's resulted from that is $1 million committed thus far to the plan for prevention, the plan that was put together, and for community programming. Highlights of that are a mentorship program with our Big Brother, Big Sisters program, to make sure that young men and young women are getting they're getting some pull from the other side, to make sure that they're getting messages from folks about how valuable they are and what's possible for them in the world, and what's possible for them in the world right here at home. The Opportunity Hub, as I mentioned before, a one-stop shop for education and workforce. I put money in my proposed budget for that, for the city of Minneapolis. There are others who will be investing in that as well. And a $500,000 grant program, as mentioned before. The Attorney General mentioned before, an organization called Youth Prize is home to some philanthropic dollars that are coming through to be invested into the community, where it can be used most effectively to provide opportunities for young people. Within the city, we also have a community engagement team. It is building relationships with communities all across the city, not just the Somali community, our African American community, Native American community, Latino community, etc. Because those relationships are important. And even now, We have officers who are in the community, who are talking with folks all the time. It actually led to them recognizing that one of the young men in the community was speaking differently today than he had spoken 2 weeks ago, that he sounded different, that his attitude was different, and they talked to him. But they also had relationships so deeply in the community that they could talk to his mom, and they could talk to friends of the family, and folks would realize there was something going on with him, and the pull factor on him became strong enough to keep him home. Those relationships in the community are incredibly important, and building that trust is incredibly important. And it's one of the biggest challenges that we have. The lack of trust in government. A lot of folks are coming from places where their experience of government was entirely or largely negative. Lack of access to our government structures, that we as a city are not set up well for everybody, and I am working very hard to change that. And frustration with some of the interactions that they've had, including some of the police-community relationships, where that community engagement team that we've put together in the police department, as well as many of the other police-community relationship reforms we're putting in place, have become important. Building that trust is key. We focus on that engagement. We work with the community. One of the other big challenge that we face, and this is where it's a push factor, and it also prevents us from pulling young people back as far as and as hard as we can, is the xenophobia and the racism and the Islamophobia that are so prevalent in so many parts of the United States of America in particular. It builds walls, it reduces trust, and it is my job as a leader, and I would say it is all of our jobs as leaders, to see that for what it is, to figure out how to change it, and when we can't change it, manage around it and contain it so that it does not have the negative impact that it is currently having on the people that we serve and the people with whom we work. It also serves to create another form of violent extremism that we also need to watch out for. That level of Islamophobia, that level of racism, that level of xenophobia creates its own counter-movement that we have to look out for. It's a challenge to American safety because it's animating other kinds of extremism and other kinds of violence against people of color and against folks who follow Islam. We have to watch out for that, and we have to make sure that people are protected from that, and that we are also doing interventions with people who might be in the process of moving down that road as well. All of this, the role of social media is as strong there as it is anywhere else in the work that we do. So I think that I am so proud to be here today and proud to be part of the Strong Cities Network, because together we can help one another identify what these factors are. Because seeing it through the lens of someone from another city, from another country, from another continent, can help bring a new focus or a new interpretation for me of what's happening in my community. It also helps us know that the world indeed is very small, that the connection and the wall, for example, that the barrier between Minneapolis and Mogadishu, for example, is a very permeable barrier, and that the relationships I can build with folks who are in Somalia, who are on the African continent facing some of these similar strategies and challenges, that is crucial to our success moving forward, and it's one of the things I appreciate about being here. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you everyone here for the leadership you are taking to make sure that we have the most resilient communities possible, and I appreciate being here in this opportunity today.
I want to thank the panel for the richness of these interventions. A number of challenges and themes have been raised here that we will be taking up in earnest during tomorrow's SCN Steering Committee meeting. And forgive me, and it's not scripted, but because there is such enormous leadership on this steering committee, partly represented here up on this platform, but all round the room here, may I ask all of those mayors and municipal representatives that are part of the steering committee just to stand up for a moment so that we can thank you for the leadership that you've shown to date. I won't try to summarize the themes that we've raised here, but I think that one resounding message has come across, and that is that This is a new initiative with a much needed new approach, and I believe there is a sense that it has real potential. We will be working very, very hard to achieve that potential. And before we close, I'd like to welcome one last intervention virtually from Anne Hidalgo. As Mayor of Paris, Ms. Hidalgo has been at the very forefront, very, very recently, of dealing with the awful consequences of violent extremism. And we are very, very happy that she has offered to host the first annual Strong Cities Network Summit in Paris in the spring of 2016, which will bring together well over 100 local leaders from all around the world. And by that time, I hope we will have seriously started to deliver some of those services in support of the cities that we talked about earlier on. Now, to join us for that summit and to get more information about this network, please do register on the website, which is www.strongcitiesnetwork.org. Shameless propaganda, forgive me. But now, without further ado, I have the honor of passing the floor to Mayor Hidalgo.
Avec vous tous, je m'engage à ce que Paris soit un partenaire actif et déterminé de cette importante initiative et je salue les efforts de l'Institut pour le dialogue stratégique qui en est à l'origine. Durement éprouvé cette année par le terrorisme, mais toujours debout, Paris est aux côtés des villes et des gouvernements locaux qui s'engagent contre la propagation de l'extrémisme, de la violence terroriste, de l'intolérance. C'est la cohésion de nos sociétés qui est en jeu, alors ne la laissons pas détruire par des discours, par des actes de haine. Faisons tout pour que pas un de nos citoyens ne parte se battre dans des groupes radicaux qui provoquent le chaos au Moyen-Orient, réduisent les minorités religieuses et les femmes en esclavage et dénaturent l'islam. Plus largement, nous entendons partager nos expériences et mettre en commun nos stratégies de prévention de toutes les violences extrémistes, d'où qu'elles viennent. La sécurité de nos pays, la lutte antiterroriste est du domaine des États, mais nous, les élus locaux, les maires, nous sommes en première ligne au quotidien pour faire vivre la société ouverte, inclusive, multiculturelle. Nous devons agir ensemble avec le monde de la recherche et la société civile pour préserver et faire partager nos valeurs. Dans cet esprit, je vous invite d'ores et déjà à venir à Paris au printemps 2016, où je serai fière d'accueillir la première Assemblée générale de Strong Cities.
So we look forward to welcoming you there, and forgive me, just the very, very last thanks before we close. We look so much forward to working with all of you to roll out this important initiative. And I'd like to say very much from the heart a thank you to the State Department, without which this would not be happening, and in particular to Eric Rosand, who has driven the State Department's efforts on this program. And very finally, And very finally, to my absolutely extraordinary team and Sebastian Febvre, who's driven the initiative from our end. You will be hearing a lot from him and from us going forward. And thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to working together.